The medical journal Annals of Temporal Medicine published what would become its final issue before mysteriously ceasing publication. Within those pages lay the case files of Dr. Elias Meridian, a man whose medical practice defied every law of conventional healing. His patients came to him not with broken bones or festering wounds, but with injuries that existed in the spaces between seconds, cuts that bled backward through time, and scars that hadn't happened yet. Tonight, we delve into the disturbing legacy of the only physician who claimed to treat temporal wounds, injuries to the very fabric of a person's timeline. What we've uncovered will challenge everything you thought you knew about the nature of pain, healing, and the terrifying fragility of human existence across multiple moments in time. But before we begin, ask yourself this: have you ever felt an unexplained pain, a sudden ache that doctors couldn't find? Have you ever woken with a scar you couldn't remember getting? Dr. Meridian would have told you that some wounds don't heal because they're still happening. Trapped in an endless loop between one heartbeat and the next, Dr. Elias Meridian established his practice in the basement of St. Bartholomew's Hospital in London during the winter of 1943. The hospital administrators, desperate for any qualified physician during wartime, overlooked the peculiarities in his credentials. His medical degree came from the University of Prague, but from a department that had supposedly never existed. His references were written by professors who had died decades before he was born. But Meridian could heal. That much was undeniable. Patients who had been declared beyond medical help would walk out of his basement office completely cured. The catch was that he only accepted the strangest cases, people who described impossible symptoms that defied medical explanation. Sarah Whitmore was his first documented patient. She had been experiencing what she called reverse bleeding for 3 months. Every morning, at exactly 7:23, blood would appear on her clothes, flowing upward from wounds that weren't there. She would watch in horror as crimson stains spread across her dress, starting from her abdomen and moving toward her collar. But when she removed her clothes to examine her skin, she found nothing. No cuts, no punctures, not even a scratch. Traditional doctors had dismissed her as hysterical. Meridian examined her for exactly 17 minutes, then nodded grimly. He told her that she was bleeding from a wound she would receive in 4 months' time, a stab wound that would occur during the London Blitz. Her timeline had become temporarily displaced, causing her future injury to manifest in her present. According to his notes, Meridian's treatment involved something he called chronological surgery. He claimed to use specially crafted instruments that could cut through time itself, allowing him to reach into Sarah's future and repair the wound before it happened. The procedure took place in absolute darkness, and patients reported hearing sounds that shouldn't exist, the whisper of seconds being severed, the soft tear of minutes coming undone. Sarah Whitmore's reverse bleeding stopped after her session with Meridian, but 4 months later, she was indeed stabbed during an air raid, exactly as he had predicted. Witnesses say the knife passed clean through her body without leaving so much as a mark. She felt no pain, lost no blood, and walked away unharmed. The wound had already been healed in advance. But Meridian's most disturbing case began in the spring of 1945, when a young soldier named Thomas Hartwell came to see him. Hartwell had survived the liberation of Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, but he carried with him an injury that defied explanation. He claimed that part of his soul had been left behind in the camp. Trapped in a single moment of horror that played over and over again, Hartwell described feeling a constant sensation of burning, not on his skin, but inside his very existence. He could see through his own eyes at 2 different times simultaneously. Sometimes he was in London, trying to rebuild his life, but other times he was back in that camp, witnessing atrocities that his mind had tried to forget. The temporal displacement was driving him insane. Dr. Meridian's examination of Hartwell lasted 3 hours. His notes from that day make for disturbing reading. He wrote that the soldier's timeline had been fractured by extreme trauma, creating what he termed a paradox wound. Part of Hartwell's consciousness was indeed trapped in April 1945. experiencing the liberation of the camp in an infinite loop. The treatment Meridian prescribed was his most extreme yet. He called it temporal amputation, the complete removal of the affected time period from the patient's personal timeline. Hartwell would have no memory of the liberation, no knowledge of what he had seen there. The traumatic moment would be excised from his existence as if it had never occurred. But something went wrong during the procedure. Witnesses in the hospital that night reported hearing screams that seemed to echo from multiple time periods at once. The lights flickered, not randomly, but in patterns that suggested time itself was being disrupted. When morning came, they found Hartwell's body in Meridian's office, but he appeared to have died of old age, despite being only 26 years old. Meridian's notes from that night reveal his horror at what had transpired. He had successfully removed the traumatic timeline from Hartwell's existence. But without that anchoring moment of extreme experience, the soldier's entire temporal structure had collapsed. All of his remaining years had compressed into a single instant, aging him to death in moments. The incident should have ended Meridian's career, but the hospital covered it up. The war was ending, resources were stretched thin, and too many people had witnessed his miraculous healings to dismiss him entirely. Instead, they moved him to a more isolated wing and limited his patient load. It was during this period that Meridian began documenting his most disturbing discovery. He had noticed that certain patients came to him with wounds that existed in what he called temporal echoes, injuries that had occurred to their descendants, rippling backward through family bloodlines across generations. Margaret Ashford arrived at his office in 1946 with phantom burns covering 60% of her body. She felt constant, excruciating pain, but her skin showed no signs of damage. Through his examination, Meridian determined that her great-granddaughter, who wouldn't be born for another 40 years, would die in a house fire in 1991. The trauma was so severe that it was echoing backward through the family's genetic timeline. Manifesting as phantom pain in previous generations, Meridian's treatment involved what he described as prophylactic temporal intervention. He would somehow reach forward into the future and prevent the descendant's death, thus healing the ancestors' phantom wounds. Margaret's pain disappeared after the procedure, but Meridian's notes suggest that he had to make increasingly disturbing bargains with what he called temporal forces. To achieve these healings, he wrote extensively about sensing a presence during his procedures, something that existed between moments and fed on the disruption of linear time. He began to suspect that his healing abilities came not from medical skill, but from an alliance with entities that existed outside normal temporal flow. The truth became clear in his final case files. A woman named Victoria Morse came to him with what appeared to be stigmata, bleeding wounds on her hands and feet that appeared spontaneously. But Meridian's examination revealed something far more disturbing. The wounds weren't echoing from the past or future, they were existing simultaneously across all possible timelines. In every possible version of Victoria's life, across infinite parallel realities, she was experiencing crucifixion at the exact same moment. The wounds on her body were the intersection point where all these timelines converged. She was, in essence, dying in countless realities while living in this one. Meridian's notes from her treatment sessions reveal his growing obsession with what he had discovered. He wrote about temporal parasites that lived in the gaps between moments, feeding on human suffering that existed across multiple timelines. He had been serving these entities without realizing it, using his patients as anchoring points for their influence in our reality. Victoria's case broke him completely. He realized that every patient he had healed had been infected with these temporal parasites. The healing wasn't removing their wounds, it was redistributing their pain across different versions of themselves in parallel timelines. He had been spreading suffering rather than eliminating it. His final journal entry, dated December 15, 1947, describes his plan to perform what he called temporal suicide, removing himself from all timelines simultaneously. To prevent the parasites from using him further, he would cease to exist not just in the present, but retroactively across all moments of his life. The hospital staff found his office empty the next morning. But, according to their reports, the room showed signs of having been abandoned for decades. Dust covered everything, his equipment was rusted beyond recognition, and his patient files had yellowed as if they were centuries old. When they examined the building records, they found no evidence that the office had ever been rented to anyone named Ilias Meridian. But the most disturbing discovery came when they tried to contact his former patients. Sarah Whitmore had no memory of ever being treated by any doctor for reverse bleeding. Thomas Hartwell's military records showed that he had died in combat 2 years before he supposedly visited Meridian's office. Margaret Ashford's family had no knowledge of her ever experiencing phantom burns. It appeared that Meridian's temporal suicide had not only erased himself from existence, but had somehow undone all of his interventions. His patients' timelines had been restored to their original, unhealed states. The wounds he had treated were once again manifesting, but now with no one who understood how to heal them. The only evidence of his existence was the final issue of Annals of Temporal Medicine, which somehow survived his erasure from the timeline. The journal's editors had apparently tried to warn the medical community about the dangers of temporal healing, but their publication was dismissed as elaborate fiction and subsequently banned by the British Medical Association. But here's what the investigators didn't know, what they couldn't have known without access to Meridian's personal files. Before his disappearance, he had trained a successor, someone who understood the true nature of temporal wounds and the entities that fed on them. Someone who is continuing his work, but with full knowledge of the horrifying consequences. The evidence is subtle but consistent. Medical journals from around the world report isolated cases of impossible healings, patients cured of injuries that exist between moments. In Tokyo, a woman stops experiencing future pain from surgeries she hasn't had yet. In São Paulo, a man's scars from a childhood that never happened finally fade. In New York, a child stops bleeding from wounds that exist only in her dreams. Each case follows Meridian's pattern exactly. The healings are complete, miraculous, and leave no evidence of how they were achieved. The patients have no memory of their treatment, but they all share one peculiar detail. They report having dreams about a doctor who works in the spaces between seconds, stitching up wounds in the fabric of time itself. The question isn't whether Dr. Elias Meridian was real, or simply an elaborate fiction created by a medical journal with questionable ethics. The question is whether you believe that time is as linear and stable as we've been taught to assume. Whether you think pain and healing are limited to the physical realm we can see and touch. Because if Meridian's research was accurate, if temporal wounds truly exist, then somewhere between this moment and the next, people are suffering from injuries to their very existence, cuts that bleed backward through family lines, scars that haven't happened yet but hurt today, burns from fires that will consume their great-grandchildren. And if those wounds exist, then someone must be treating them. Someone with the knowledge and tools to perform surgery on time itself. Someone who understands that healing sometimes requires making deals with entities that exist in the spaces between heartbeats. The next time you feel an unexplained pain, a sudden ache that doctors can't locate or cure, remember Dr. Meridian's patience. Remember that some wounds exist only between moments. And ask yourself, would you want to know if your pain was echoing from a future that hasn't happened yet? Would you seek treatment from a doctor who could heal you across multiple timelines? Or would you prefer to believe that your suffering is limited to the here and now, safely contained within the boundaries of linear time? The choice, as they say, is yours. But choose carefully. Because once you start looking for temporal wounds, you might discover that you've been bleeding between moments your entire life, and there may be only one doctor left who knows how to make it stop. Sweet dreams.